Welcome to Power to the Industry, a boutique fitness podcast by ZingFit. This is your home for expert advice and interviews on all things boutique fitness. Let's get started. Today, I'm talking to KK Hart, a longtime friend of ZingFit and total expert and veteran of the fitness industry. KK is a certified consultant that owns and operates several wellness businesses in addition to being the CEO of a boutique sales and marketing agency, which specializes in health, fitness, wellness, and small business industries. With extensive experience as an international fitness and business expert, KK is regularly featured on Fox and the Huffington Post, among other media outlets. She has a master's degree in health and business and over 15 years of experience specifically helping health, fitness, beauty, and wellness businesses grow. As a business coach and consultant, KK coaches on strategies for revenue, retention, pricing, sales, and marketing. I'm so excited to have her here today as we cover the new landscape for boutique fitness studios, which will require a whole new mindset and set of KPIs as this global recession looms on the horizon. Let's dive in. Hi, KK. Thanks so much for being here with us.
I'm glad to be here.
So we've got a lot of craziness happening in our industry right now. You are a consultant, but you're also a studio owner. I'm curious, how, as a business owner, are you approaching this situation for your studio?
Well, it's really a delicate time. And I think part of my mojo of being a consultant and a coach is that I do wear, multiple hats, including being a studio owner. And what I found is that there's no one size fits all approach to kind of how we decide to move through the business concerns that we have due to COVID, but also how we think about the recovery. So the way that I would advise myself is the same way that I work with many of my clients, which is to really consider the short and long-term goals of the business. And I think oftentimes, especially at delicate times like this, it can be really easy to do the easiest solution for the now, but not thinking about the next. And so if you know anything about, our culture as an economy and our culture as boutique fitness is that there are highs and lows, right? We deal with seasonality all throughout the year, regardless of COVID-19. We deal with changes to how people view fitness and wellness over the years. And although we've seen an amazing boom, I think there has to be a state of normalcy that we will return to that will both flourish boutique fitness studios, but also give us a chance to look back and almost say, what are the things we could have done better? And so frankly, I think part of that is really divided economically and then community. So if I talk about economically, specifically as a studio owner, one of the things that I think is commonly not spoken about that could help us to provide, I think, a better environment now for our businesses, but also for the future, it comes down to basic money management. And so even as a life coach, I talk to people about this in their personal lives. It's really important to know that you have reserves in the bank for unforeseen circumstances. And that is no different for the business. So having a minimum of 3 to 6 months of reserves of all of your expenses tied into a really easily accessible liquid account is extremely important for any business to survive, but also to thrive in the future. So that's kind of the basic economic principle. Secondly, of course, is preparing for the revolution and the recovery, because we know that will come. And so I'm not foolhardy enough to say that I know it will come next week or next month or even next year, but I'll say this: the strong always survive. And so when we think about our community, really it ties into our systems, what I call the key performance indicators of the business. And so how do you build your community during these times? There's many ways to stay connected, many ways to stay proactive, and that's more important now, but also equally as important in the recovery. So those are just a few really key areas that I believe every business owner should be thinking of. How do I assess my financial situation now? How do I improve my financial situation for the future? And then same thing with regards to communication in the community. How do I really hone my community now where it seems to be more difficult than ever before? But then how do I use these principles that I've now jumped into, kind of both feet first, not really sure that I was going to do it prior, and how do I utilize this in the future to continue to grow and thrive as a business? And I think that's where, video on demand and streaming has really become the talk of the day, but I hope that it will also be the talk of the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's really such great insight. As this thing has kind of come up so quickly and we've had to respond, it's not like a normal recession, with everything just coming to a screeching halt. There's so many studio owners that are in different situations. Some of them are completely cash strapped. Some of them have a little bit of savings, and some of them have been anticipating a recession and were really prepared for this. So as a consultant, how would you advise studio owners that are in those different situations?
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to managing the finances and then also managing the way that you manage your community or the way you connect with your community. So if you're thinking about perhaps a business that's not been entirely proactive with their money, and so they're a bit strapped right now, there are things that they need to do in the now, but there are things they need to do to prepare for the future, much of which is looking at an expense report, looking at a profit and loss report. Oftentimes when I meet with clients, whether as a coach or consultant or even on the marketing side of things as my agency will interact with boutique fitness studios, the first thing we do instead of adding to the expense line is to review the profit and review the losses and then look at where we can pluck areas of waste out of that report. And often what we'll find is unnecessary use of vendors, overuse or underutilization of basic marketing principles, and then honestly, a set it and forget it approach to marketing and promotion and sales, which is generally not how boutique fitness has been successful. So if a business is cash strapped, one of the very first things we need to do is go back to basics and look at the profit and look at the loss and look at how the business has been performing well before COVID-19 started, creeping into their space. Now, if there's savings there, this is an interesting time. I've been known to say my own version of a quote from Warren Buffett, which is, at a time like this, we should be proactive when people are being fearful and fearful when people are being proactive. And so what that means is we really need to consider if this is a time where the industry seems to be, people will say the bubble has burst, then it's time for those of us that have money in the bank, that have been really good about saving and preparing for the future, whether they anticipated a recession or not, to think, how do I invest at this time? Do I invest in my business? Do I invest in my education? Do I invest in my team? Do I invest in the market? There's a very holistic approach to investing in the business at a time where most people are fearful, they're strapped, and they're unable. That is why I say the strong will survive. And then finally, if someone has been anticipating a recession and perhaps they're sitting on more reserves than the average studio, maybe a studio owner that doesn't rely on the studio for income, I think that's even more important, but it's also time to think about future expansion. Because if your model is working to the point where you have not just money in the bank, but money to the point where the cash is not going to be as impactful as investment into expansion of the brand, expansion of locations, expansion of how you market and promote, I think these are the times that we double down, because that means that things are not necessarily bad, even though you may not be open. It means things are good, they could be better, and how do we get there?
Yeah, totally. It seems like there's also going to be a lot of opportunity on the other side of this for the brands that are really able to thrive through this. And people are going to just be itching to get out of their house. And we could see even more of an expansion in the industry that we weren't anticipating.
Absolutely. You have to think we are essentially the wellness industry. And if there's one thing we know about this industry is that there is a need for proactivity in our client base, that we are just now starting to see that this health crisis can really bring to light and make us much more relevant, much more connected, and honestly to provide a lot more than just a workout class. I always say to my clients, you provide a lot more than just a kick-ass workout. You provide a lot more than just somewhere for someone to go to sweat for an hour. And so when we think about even the definition of recovery, it's a return to the normal state of health, mind, or strength. Doesn't that sound like what we do in boutique fitness, but to the nth degree?
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, actually, I'm really curious about streaming and video on demand. We've been thinking about it, writing about it, talking about it. It's so front of mind for our industry right now. And I'm wondering if you could give some insights into what would be the right fit for a studio, doing streaming versus video on demand, maybe some of the benefits or drawbacks of each platform. We've seen Vimeo being really great for video on demand, but a little more pricey for streaming, and people going to Zoom to be doing live classes so they can be interacting with their clients so that they can be actively keeping people from injuring themselves and doing adjustments, versus just streaming out to a larger audience where you're not seeing them back on like in televideo or Uscreen. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Sure. So I think here's one of the things that I wish our industry had done a little better prior to COVID. And that's to be proactive in this area. Streaming, video on demand, live classes, it's been around for a while. And I think many studio owners that I've spoken to, specifically in the last couple of weeks, but really in the last couple of years, have had this on the back burner as we'd love to do it, but we're not there yet. We'd love to do it, but we're not clear what's needed, or we'd love to do it, but we're making so much money and our focus is on classes in person that we feel like it may be a dilution of what we're currently offering. And so my first thought process is to be really clear. In order to make any digital platform work, you have to take it very seriously. The clients that I've seen with the most success, they treated this new entity as essentially another fitness studio, another location, another entity of the same name, of the same vibe, but with a different focus. And I think that's actually extremely important to note, is that it's not just that you just hit record on a button of any platform and then suddenly you build it and they will come. And I think the now that we're working through is that, yes, it's the only thing your community has. So they're very open and receptive. And so it's a great time to dive in. But when I think about the future, always focused on the recovery, always focused on what's next, it's essential that we think about kind of the 4 systems, that being structure, automation, monetization, and promotion. And so those are my fit 4. Those are the things that make you successful with streaming or video on demand for the long term, not just for the fact that you can't keep your doors open otherwise, people can't come in currently. And so you mentioned a couple different platforms there, but I think the key to this is understanding, how do you decide the right platform for you, and then how do you get started in a way that actually prevents you from cannibalizing your growth in the future. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about that, there's a couple of things that I personally always look for when I help a client launch, whether it's live streaming or video on demand. And I'll say this, I don't believe that it has to be either or, but I do believe you have to understand your audience's needs. And we often emphasize the need for a live class versus on demand. Many times, streaming a live class sounds good in theory, until we remember that a large percentage of people that are interested in our business, that go to our websites, that even come in for a class, don't join the community as a member, don't buy in all the way because the times don't necessarily fit their current lifestyle. And so right now we have people really captive, they're at home, they're willing to basically do anything. Again, thinking about the recovery, what will that look like for you as a studio to sustain? But more importantly, who is your target audience and what is best for them? So my first thought process is to make sure, is streaming really the way that we need to go for the future live? Is it on demand and having more of a digital library, or is it both? There are a few platforms that do both very well, but there's also many platforms that don't allow for the level of growth and the level of profitability that I think every studio is looking for when they're going to a more digital studio entity. So to go back to structure, automation, monetization, and promotion, here are the things that you want to look for when you're deciding on a platform. I think the very first and most simple is being able to trial the platform with no commitment. What that allows you to do is really understand what this will be like for the long term. Is it user-friendly? Do you have the ease and the knowledge of who your client base is? Can you communicate directly to your client base? Do you own your client base? A very important distinction for most video on demand and streaming platforms. And so that's something you can almost instantaneously find simply from diving in and setting up a free trial. The second thing that's really readily known in the industry is to stay away from revenue share. And so that can be very controversial. And I just want to give this one kind of mindset as to why. Unless you're looking to take on a partner into your business, there's no reason to share revenue for something that you're doing all the work to set up. A appropriate platform will have great streaming. They will not buffer. They'll guarantee you an upside. They'll include the hosting in your platform, in your account, and they will allow you the chance to fully white label, meaning you don't need to rely on their branding and their ecosystem to be successful. So that really helps you to delineate what's most important for my business and for my brand without giving up the things that I don't think many of my studio owners are realizing that they're giving up by choosing the easy, free, or even the popular option. And then lastly, when you think about how this video on demand or streaming service is going to grow over time, I think one of the most important things to consider is payments and the way that you structure your communication. So having everything as integrated as possible is really in the benefit of the studio owner, but also in the benefit of the user. The user wants to know you, right? If not, they could go to any national platform that offers 1 million more classes than you can as a boutique studio owner, that offers, names that they may recognize, and that's not really the goal of the average target client for a boutique fitness studio. So when you think about the communications within the platform, it needs to be seamless, it needs to be automated, and it needs to be highly systematic. That ability is very difficult to find, and it's why I've leaned towards Uscreen as a platform, but it's important that you think through if that's even important to you. When I think about the ability to not just connect with the client who has bought, but also understand and push promotions to the client who has not yet bought or has not yet moved forward, that level of advanced analytics is almost unheard of in the video on demand and streaming industry currently. And so utilizing Uscreen has been helpful for that reason. As a marketer, we're able to do so much more, just as you would with using a software platform that allows you to own your brand and yet still connect to your community in a way that makes sense for you and that's authentic.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's so much that needs to go into these considerations, right? And even last week, we saw a lot of studios being very panicked and rushing to make these decisions. Do you see that maybe some of that crisis response is starting to slow down and that studio owners are really thinking these things through more? Or do you think that there's still a lot of chaos happening in our industry?
Oh gosh, yeah, lots of chaos, lots of lack of understanding of what will happen in the future. And I think the reason for this is, honestly, we have legislation right now that's not very small business focused, not very pro small business. So there's not a lot coming out maybe from the government that most people would expect when you're hearing about bailouts for, large conglomerate corporations like the airline industry. So there's that for sure. And there's a lot of misinformation. So this is where it's difficult because I feel for studio owners that don't have maybe a proactive resource where they can go to someone who's well-versed on what's going on in the industry, what are the best practices. And so when I meet them at this point, it's a very different conversation than if I had met them months ago in a normal setting and they were just being proactive about, what they wanted to do in the future. So I really feel for studio owners that are in that panic position because it seems to be lasting a lot longer than just the initial shock of having to close. And I think part of that is, lack of responsiveness. The businesses weren't necessarily set up for the idea that they could ever be without having clients in the door for an extended period of time. And so that lack of responsiveness has really shifted to just severe fear. I think the great thing about this is that I've met so many studio owners that are really thinking differently. So even with fear as their guide, they're also looking within and saying, well, what could I have done differently? Is there insurances I should have bought? Are there things I should have put in my waiver? Should I have done certain things differently with my marketing or with my team? And I think that's really encouraging. It's encouraging to see that it's not just about the negative that's happening, but it's about what can be done better for the future. Because again, I've said this, a couple times already, and I'll say it again, there will always be a recovery to this difficult time, whether you're calling it a recession, depression, or just a COVID shutdown. And so thinking forward, thinking ahead, planning and being prepared, that never goes out of style. That will never not be trendy. And it will always be the answer to the difficult times, even when we don't really foresee what will happen next.
Thank you. That's such good insight that there's, as we both said before, there's such an opportunity moving forward to really be smarter. And this is something that our industry has been thinking about as it's so new, like what's going to happen when we face our first crisis and our first recession. And we're really seeing where the chips fall now, and we'll be so much stronger and more prepared in the future.
Absolutely. And that's the future. That is the focus of the future, is how do we not just get strong, but stay strong? And how do we change kind of the things that we struggled with as an industry, and so that we never get into this situation again? I think that's the really exciting part of this whole situation, trying to see the sunny side.
Yeah. So speaking of like immediate response, we see that some studios are giving all of their clients their money back, or they're mass pausing all of their contracts. Do you think studios should be doing that? Is there a smart way to do that? What's your take on that?
I would say the smartest thing to do is to set aside some time to really consider the short-term, long-term, and financial basics of the business. So this is typically a point where if I'm asked that question, I'm often offering a free consultation. Let's analyze the business from a very high level and then also from a micro level to understand kind of where you're at for the now, where you're at for 30 days and 60 days and 90 days. So I typically end with a free 30, 60, 90-day plan. And so there is no one-size-fits-all answer to this, because there's so many things dependent on how the studio has been structured, both from a business perspective, but also from a financial perspective, and also the goals of the studio for the long term. It's really important to think about, because although the panic sets in now, and of course there are setbacks now, there are things that if a studio has goals for the future, that if it's done now can really hurt the studio, the staff, and even the brand going forward. So this is a really clear area to ask for some help and to sit down and enjoy that free consultation and get a plan for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And what you talked about KPIs, and in your sessions, you probably go into some KPIs with clients. What are some of those key performance indicators that studio owners should be setting for themselves right now? Not only for the long-term success of the business, but just to keep themselves motivated in such a challenging time.
Oh, absolutely. And I think actually there's not one KPI, it's all KPIs that we should be reviewing right now. To focus on some of the tactics within the KPIs, certainly marketing, revenue, future attendance, pricing. These are the areas where, again, the proactive studios that are doing well right now, even through this, have been focusing and growing based on KPIs. The other section of studios that are doing well or surviving right now through COVID are studios that already went online. They already had a very serious desire to grow in that area. Now, if you're thinking you're not really one of those two studios and still willing to do the work while you have the time, this is where the proactive marketing and communications can really help you with your current community. But also you must realize your prospective clients haven't gone away. They're still curious about what your business does. They're still visiting your website. I can almost guarantee it. And so making sure that your website is not just some huge, paragraph about how difficult things are right now and how you don't know when you're going to open, but that it's also giving people a chance to get to know your studio, to get to know your brand, and to understand what you stand for in the community. There are also some really perfunctory aspects of business that need to be considered, such as if you're offering these streaming classes. I think the thing I've seen that's been most concerning is just offering everything free on Zoom without realizing that there are waivers that need to be revised. There are things in your staff makeup that need to be considered. There needs to be training on both sides, both from the staff perspective and also from the administrative perspective on how this is handled. And so this is really one of those times where if you've never had the desire, interest, or time to really roll up your sleeves and think about the growth of the business, this is the time to do so. And it's also what's going to make you get through this a lot more systematically and a lot more successfully.
Thank you so much, KK. You've really covered so many topics and so many considerations that these business owners need to be thinking about now and just slowing down and assessing before they make a move. I'm wondering if you could only offer one piece of advice to studio owners right now, what would it be?
If I could only offer one piece of advice to studio owners of any size, of any level of effectiveness, it would be invest. It would be invest in your people, invest in your own business structure, invest in your future personally, but also invest in the business. and spend the time deciding where are the areas in which you could do so. I think the panic that we're seeing right now means the very first response is to shut down, not just physically, not just the doors of the studio and the ability to host classes, but it's to pluck marketing budgets. It's to lay off staff. And I actually firmly don't just believe, but have experienced many hardships in life and in business. And the number one best advice I could tell you to get out of it better than you were before is to invest in you, invest in your people, invest in your community, and absolutely invest in your business. That's advice for the long term, but it's also for the now and the short term.
So you are right now offering free analysis and consultation to studios. And also at the end of that consultation, you're offering them a free plan. And then you also have a course on how to start live streaming and all the things they need to think about to do it right. Where can people go to find that?
You can find out more about me, the free consultation, and the analysis plan at kkhart.com.
Awesome. And KK is also offering for ZingFit's audience a discount of 50% on that live streaming course. So stay tuned for that information after this interview. Thank you so much, KK. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm wishing everyone out there the absolute best of this situation and some peace and obviously some health for you and your family. I'll look forward to working with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you. Stay safe. Go check out kkhart.com to get a free consultation. That's kkhart.com. And you can now get 50% off her course to learn how to set up your online virtual studio. Go to kkhart.com/streaming your online virtual studio. You can check out that link in our show notes. Thanks so much to KK for joining me, and thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.